Shalom, first and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahawah, bahasham, yahawashi, bahasham, quadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who are teaching this truth in sincerity. And a shout out to Yakim that's out there on the four corners of the earth proclaiming this truth. Barak the Yahawah, Barak the yahawashi, bahasham, quadash, Barak up. So we're taking a look here at the U.S. military doing what it does best, starting wars and then, of course, leaving, And, of course, they're going into Iraq to return the terrorists there. So that way they will be in guise of fighting ISIS, when you and I both know that the only reason that they're there, of course, is to continue their military presence. So that way they can create any insurgent they want and invade Syria from Iraq. So that's pretty much what's happening here. They're just regrouping, because they plan to invade Syria again. Make no mistake about it. They're not there for no reason. But they might be concentrating their efforts also on trying to actually enter into Iran. Because remember, we're so close to the very end here that, they may actually be a lot closer than what one believes. That they might be actually moving the military into Iraq to actually try to attack Iran. We know that at least the flock Amalek will be the first to start that, but that doesn't mean that the U.S. military ain't on standby, because who controls the U.S. military? Amalek. The least of the flock drawing them out into this war. So there's the convoy of them leaving. And of course, this from Press TV. Other footage, but I mean, this is during the day, the U.S. Entering into Iraq, so that way they can terrorize the region, because we know who the real terrorists are. It always has been America. They're the hammer of the whole earth, as the scriptures say. So, pretty much, though, they... I believe are about to make their moves on Iran, that it's not that far around the corner. So, of course, the PG&E blackouts and all that, those things are a beginning of what will soon be the lockdown in your cities. And this also in from Press TV.
Turkey illegally is engaging in naked aggression against Syria by sending troops cross-border, by shelling cross-border, by aerial bombardments cross-border, Syrian territory. This is strictly forbidden under the UN Charter and other international law. No nation may preemptively attack another for any reasons except in self-defense, and only if the Security Council authorizes it, no other reason. Doing it for any other reason is aggression, and that is the highest of all high crimes, Nuremberg-level crimes. Well, President Erdogan in Turkey made up reasons. He invented reasons to attack Syrian territory. His reasons have nothing to do why he's doing it. He said he wants to fight terrorism. It's a lie. He supports terrorism. He supports ISIS, supports al-Nusra, gives them a safe haven in Turkish territory, gives them arms the way the U.S. and Europe does. He's involved in that. He said he wants to prevent the terrorist cross-border threat, including by Kurdish fighters. Well, Kurdish fighters pose no threat to Turkish territory, except in self-defense if Turkey attacks them. And self-defense is absolutely legal under international law. What Erdogan really wants, and it's been his long-term aim, is to annex northern Syrian territory, especially its oil-producing areas. He's got the same aim for northern Iraq that has a lot more oil than Syria. Syria has small amounts of oil. Iraq is loaded with oil in its north and its southern areas, probably in other areas as well. It's also the world's second largest gas producer after Russia. This is Erdogan's real intentions, and the reasons he gives for wanting to rout terrorism and so on, these are fabricated. They have nothing to do with his real aims. Where does the U.S. stand? The Pentagon made a statement complaining about Turkey's cross-border activities. Well, the proof of the pudding is in the actual policies. The Security Council met yesterday in closed-door session. Both the U.S. and Russia vetoed a Security Council resolution that condemned Turkish aggression in Syria, vetoed it. That shows where the U.S. and Russia stands on this issue. What more can be said about that? They may not overtly say we support this kind of thing, but they really are supporting it by refusing to condemn it. That's what it comes down to. The policy actions, not the public statements. That's the only thing that matters.
And that's just it, though, is, of course, the U.S. gave Turkey a green light, pretty much. Said, go ahead and occupy that. You know, we're not going to stand in the way because you're an ally. And this in from anti-media. As Turkey advances, Syrian army moves to confront invasion. The Turkish military and its rebel allies are reporting more progress and are advancing deeper into northern Syria. Through the previously promised to keep the offensive confined to the 30-kilometer from the border, there is growing concern that they'll move further ultimately. Yeah, because again, they always wanted to annex Syria to control the oil, just like they planned to do with Iraq. And that's why the U.S. military is moving into Iraq, to try to stop that. Oh, make no mistake about it, that the United States wants to keep the oil in Iraq. In reaction, the Syrian Arab army has begun deploying further north to potentially confront the Turkish advance. Through the Syrian state media did not say where the Syrian troops were going. Subsequent reports put them in Kobane and Manbij. In Aleppo province, the siege of Kurdish Kobane by ISIS was a major issue earlier in the war, and being right on the border, it's well within Turkey's war goals. Manbij, a bigger and more important city, would clearly be a high priority for Turkey and its rebels, but falls at least partially beyond the 30-kilometer safe zone, meaning it's a gray area how far Turkey will actually go. Syria has already said they were intending to resist Turkey, but had suggested they weren't interested in working with the Kurds, terming them agents of Washington. This seems to have changed, however, with recent reports that negotiations have been held on a Russian airbase inside Syria. Remember the Coca-Cola that the United States left Russia? Though U.S. arms have turned the Kurdish SDF into a substantial faction, it doesn't look likely they could seriously resist a Turkish invasion, though the Syrian army is potentially in a better position to slow them down. It seems inevitable that both sides all want to coordinate amid this big conflict. And this one also in. All troops leaving Syria will head to Iraq. And, I just showed the footage there. According to Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, the current plan is that all U.S. troops leaving Syria will be redeployed into western Iraq. The troops there will continue to engage in proxy support for ISIS. How that's going to work isn't entirely clear. After all, there aren't really any ISIS fighters in western Iraq anymore, though Esper suggested that the U.S. wasn't ruling out crossing into Syria for some operations. See what I was saying? It's right there in this article. Right now, there aren't many ISIS fighters there either. There will be a move of more than 700 troops into Iraq, which is likely to raise eyebrows in Iraq, as all indicators are that the U.S. is at or over the troop cap negotiated with the Iraqi government, and this surprise deployment came amid calls for Iraqi lawmakers to expel the U.S. troops already there. So, pretty much the United States is doing what it does best, invading Iraq against the will of the Iraqi government. It's clear why the U.S. would like to just move the troops to western Iraq, as it's close, would make for a convenient area to stage back into Syria at any time, and also puts more U.S. ground troops adjacent to neighboring Iran. See, I always said that they may be doing that. Always a top U.S. military priority, yet the risk of turning Iraq into a staging ground for U.S. troops, which is what Iraq has always been, into neighboring countries that have been a big problem for Iraqi officials, and that controversy will continue. The obvious problems with this redeployment shows that the administration probably didn't do a lot of pre-planning on what would happen with the troops, and that officials fairly quickly decided that keeping the troops in the region instead of actually withdrawing them was the priority, because they were never going to withdraw them. No, this war is going to go on all the way to World War III. We're at the beginning stages of the Third World. Oh yeah, and the supposed ceasefire, though it really wasn't a ceasefire at all, because, of course, Turkey's Air Force started bombarding positions. But it says, we have hours left. Turkish ceasefire on edge of collapse as Erdogan gives Kurds hours to flee territory. At last week's ceasefire between Turkey, northern Syria, and its Kurdish inhabitants, which was just 24 hours ago, now appears in jeopardy. On Monday, Turkey gave Kurdish fighters until Tuesday night to leave a narrow strip of territory in northeastern Syria or face becoming targets, setting aside as its demand for the militia to withdraw from a larger safe zone. And there's fucketary Pence, or was he Vice Penis? Yeah, I think he's Vice Penis. Just pretty much the vice of the main clown, Donald J. Trump. And, of course, like everything else, you're always going to have pop-ups in this goddamn bullshit. As Bloomberg notes, citing a senior Turkey official, said the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces must exit the 120-kilometer area between the Syrian border towns of Tal Abyad and Ras Al Ain by 10 p.m. local time on Tuesday, while Turkey still wants the Kurds to withdraw from a swatch of frontier territory more than 440 kilometers along the 32-kilometer deep. It recognizes that won't happen before the expiry of a 120-hour truce negotiated by the U.S. last week, said the official who ruled out any extension of the deadline for withdrawal from a 120-kilometer long frontier. The clarification over the parameters of the truce on Monday followed threats by President Erdogan to restart the offensive if the militants do not pull back from the area. Turkey's ultimate goal is clear. The 120-kilometer strip, so far 125 vehicles have left the area, and the escort to implement the deal was closely coordinated with the United States. The official said, adding that Turkey plans to set up observation points, including combat units in the area. He also said that control over the 120-kilometer strip would belong to the Turkish Air Force. And so, they're negotiating parts of Syria to Turkey. Does this make sense? Well, you see, the United States considers everything theirs, so they just say, yeah, you can go ahead and take it. Here's the deal. Because it belongs to us. It doesn't belong to Syria. Now, we seize that. But that it would take time to fully make sure the area is cleared from the militants. Separately, Turkish President Erdogan is due to travel to Sochi on Tuesday for talks with Vladimir Putin that will likely dictate what happens next. With the departure of U.S. forces, Russia has become the sole major influencer in Syria since its military intervened to help the proxy war in favor of Bashar al-Assad's regime, because there was no civil war. It's always been a proxy. As Bloomberg notes, Russia has been favoring direct contacts between Turkey and Syria based on a 1998 security accord. Though there are no plans for such talks between Erdogan's visit to Sochi on Tuesday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov tells reporters at news conference with Bulgarian counterpart, I don't even know how to pronounce that name, so I'm just not going to. Meanwhile, as the U.S. withdraws from northern Syria, the WSJ reports that civilians in Kurdish areas hurled rotten fruit and insults at a convoy of U.S. military's vehicles that crossed from northern Syria into Iraq early Monday. And they should be pissed, because the United States is nothing but a liar. And, it's like, how many times are you going to trust this devil to know that he's the devil? Make a dramatic drawdown to an American presence there to combat Islamic State, which we know that they're there to support the Islamic State. A Wall Street Journal reporter saw around a dozen armored vehicles on the road near Shaikan in northern Iraq flying the Yankee swastikas. Stony-faced U.S. soldiers flashed victory signs for the camera. They appeared to be part of a larger convoy that passed through the town of Duak, about 37 miles from the Syrian border, early Monday. A witness there heard onlookers in the predominantly Kurdish city curse the soldiers. One man called them sons of bitches and shouted at them to get out, he said. Well, of course, they don't want America there, because America is the reason for all of this. America has always started wars and then left the people high and dry after they got their interest. The U.S. withdrawal has been seen as a historical betrayal by the Kurds, who partner with the U.S. troops in Syria to fight Islamic State. The U.S. presence had served as a buffer against Turkey with regards to the Kurdish fighters as terrorists. Fear not, though, instead of withdrawing, it now appears the U.S. troops are merely relocating to neighbor Iraq. The U.S. already has around 5,000 troops in Iraq, many of whom are based in the western province of Anbar. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark said late Saturday that all roughly 1,000 U.S. troops ordered to leave northern Syria would be redeployed to western Iraq and conduct operations for the Islamic State extremist group there, which, of course, you know that ISIS ain't really there unless the United States goes ahead and recreates them, which is probably why, you know, you're seeing all those Daesh and Takfiri terrorists being escorted by the U.S. military, so they're just going to set up base there. American terrorists are leaving Syria via helicopters, planes, and ground convoys, a process that will be completed within weeks, Esper said. He didn't say whether precisely these troops would go. Yeah, exactly, because they just plan to reform, you know, because they plan to reinvade later. That's why they're staying in the Anbar province. And make no mistake about it, this son of a bitch lies too. Erdogan is 100% behind the terrorists. Absolutely. Because that's what the Free Syrian Army is a terrorist proxy, you know, made up. It was brokered by the United States and Turkey. So pretty much they're going forth with their deal, which is to control the oil. You see, Turkey's been pissed off ever since, you know, the United States did not back them when they shot down a Russian jet flying over the area. So pretty much, though, they had to face the heat alone. And since then, that deal has been broken, and they've been dealing secretly, well, not really secretly, but they've been dealing with Russia, purchase of the S-400s, you know, because, of course, the United States didn't back them, so now, you know, they're going through, and, of course, the United States cut off the seizure of the oil by creating the Syrian Democratic Forces, which was their new plan to stop Turkey from being able to steal the oil. But you see, they still turn tail and run. You know, because, of course, like everything else, though, they were importing and stealing oil from Syria to go into Turkey. And they were stealing it from Iraq, too. Since when did you start to side with terror? Erdogan asks West. President Erdogan says the West's failure to support Turkey's cross-border operation against Kurdish militants in northeastern Syria means standing by terrorists. Can you imagine the whole West stood by the terrorists and all attacked us, including NATO member states and European Union countries, said Erdogan, speaking at Turkey's World Forum in Istanbul on Monday. Turkish military forces and militants of the so-called Free Syrian Army, who enjoy Ankara's patronage, on October 9 launched a cross-border invasion of northeast Syria in a declared attempt to clear Kurdish militants from the so-called People's Protection Units from border areas. Ankara views the U.S. YPG as a terrorist organization tied to the homegrown Kurdistan Workers' Party militant group, which has been seeking an autonomous Kurdish region in Turkey since 1984. The YPG, which itself is the military wing of the Syrian Kurdish Democratic Union Party, constitutes the backbone of the so-called Syrian Democratic Forces, an anti-Damascus alliance of predominantly Kurdish militants. You see how the United States used them to exploit the Kurds. You know, they used the Kurds to exploit the situation So that way they could still pretty much try to take down the Syrian government. The incursion came after the U.S. abruptly withdrew its forces from the region, clearing the path for Turkey to go ahead with a planned military action against Washington's longtime Kurdish allies. Turkey plans to create a 32-kilometer safe zone in the northeast of Syria, clear from presence of Kurdish militants, and relocate 1 million Syrian refugees there. So pretty much, though, that's what this is about, and the United States is very good at that. Hey, George Bush did the same thing. Only the Kurds had it worse because they were getting attacked from both Iraq and Turkey back then. And there's one more. Turkey can have bases on its own soil, but not in Syria. This is coming from Iran. Iran had expressed opposition to Turkey establishing military bases inside Syria, calling on Ankara to respect the Arab country's territorial integrity. The Turks can have bases on their own side of the border, but establishing bases on Syrian soil is unacceptable and amounts to violating the sovereignty of a member of the United Nations Foreign Ministry, spokesman Abbas Mousavi said Monday. Mousavi said Turkey's security concerns, while legitimate, should be resolved amicably and with full respect for Syria's sovereignty. Syria's sovereignty and integrity must be respected by all countries of the region, he said. Nothing there were already various mechanisms and agreements in place that could be used to address Turkey's concerns. The spokesman said Iran was ready to engage Syrian Kurds, Syria's government, as well as Turkey in order to bring them closer. Turkish military forces and their FSA proxies launched an invasion of northeastern Syria on October 9 in a bid to clear Kurdish militants and the so-called People's Protection Units from its border areas. Again, just kind of repeats of the last report. So, United States doing what it does best, pretty much leaving them to fight Turkey all alone. So the only thing, and Bashar al-Assad said it, he said it a long time ago to them, that if they make any deals with the United States, they will just leave them. The only ones that will actually fight for their rights will be the Syrian Arab Army, which is why you're starting to see the Syrian Arab Army regain controls of the area. But, Esau's going to escalate this, of course, because at least the flock, Amalek, is going to draw them back, which is why they haven't withdrawn fully. They're just regrouping in Iraq.